Hello and welcome to Life Strategies on Demand. My name is Rafia and I am a life coach. Hello and welcome to this series of videos about overcoming anxiety. Do any of these statements sound familiar to you? You worry too much. You must drag yourself out of bed every morning and often wake up feeling sad for no obvious reason. You are disposed to making negative predictions. You worry about the worst that could happen in any given situation. You take negative feedback very personally. You are your biggest critic. You also avoid people more than you should. Anything else than perfection feels like failure to you. As a result of these experiences, you are likely to feel sad and stressed. But when these unpleasant emotions begin to consume you, then you must act before it gets much worse. The good news is that we have a remarkable ability to heal. We can shift to a more positive and constructive space. There is a wide range of skills and tools to help manage and overcome anxiety. This anti-anxiety formula series has been designed and filled with questions that help you reflect and find answers for yourself. Anxiety can creep up on you in many ways, from physical and behavioral symptoms that are obvious to subtler symptoms that mess with your emotional and cognitive state of being. Yet each time it can leave behind a somewhat similar and familiar feeling, the feeling of being a little more lost, battered, and alone. You need to understand the many dimensions within you and your anxiety. Once you start identifying these dimensions, which are mostly characterized by triggers and symptoms, you will be able to work around them and in time overcome them too. No anxious person has the same set of symptoms, which is why each person's anxiety is unique and therefore their individual journey. That said, most people have some of each type of the symptom, only in different combinations. For example, you dislike change. Every time you are put into a new situation, you feel restless and worried. You overprocess information, decisions and possibilities before acting. You tend to be pessimistic about the present and future. You constantly dwell into the negative past experiences. You are your harshest critic. You feel awkward when someone compliments you. You believe that people don't mean their compliments or are mocking you in some way. Anxiety on the inside can affect what you do and how you act on the outside. And so, if you were to observe your mind and body carefully, you might be able to notice some signs, behavioral and physical, that can tell you what your anxiety might be doing to you. For instance, an anxious person might be dealing with several conflicting and apprehensive thoughts. The internal noise and fear that reverberates inside might make them appear tired, withdrawn, and even nervous. These symptoms can also result from various other reasons, so consult your primary care physician before making any conclusions. If you could follow an anxious mind, you might see patterns of unfavorable thoughts that keep playing on and off. These thoughts might be triggers of the anxiety itself, so addressing them is very important. Consider what you are worrying about, or a challenging experience where you became anxious. This could happen at work over something someone said, or had a negative feedback from your meeting with your manager. You can also reflect on any worrying thoughts, the ones that haven't happened yet, but you fear. Anxiety can be triggered by a variety of things, both external and internal. Some common external triggers include stressful life events, such as job loss or a loved one's death, unexpected changes in routine, such as a new work schedule or a move to a new city. Trauma such as witnessing or experiencing a violent event. Internal triggers are often related to our thoughts and emotions. For example, anxious thoughts about an upcoming event, such as an important test or presentation, can trigger anxiety. Other internal triggers include feelings of inadequacy or insecurity, perfection, chronic stress, unresolved childhood trauma, or abuse. Learning to identify your own personal anxiety triggers can be an important step in managing your anxiety. If you're not sure what triggers your anxiety is coming from, consider keeping a journal to track your symptoms. Once you identify a trigger, you can begin to work on developing a coping strategy or strategies to deal with it. Here are questions that you can record in a notebook to help you identify the feelings you experience when you are triggered. If you really want to overcome your anxiety, it is really important to spend a bit of time working on these questions, which will help you with how to plan your reactions. The first question is, what people, places, or things trigger your anxiety? Are your triggers more obvious, like someone yelling at you, or more subtle, like a song on the radio? How do you feel when you're experiencing an anxiety trigger? What thoughts go through your mind when you're experiencing anxiety? If you would like to pause and reflect on these questions, please do. Number 1, what people, places, or things trigger your anxiety? Number 2, are your triggers more obvious, like someone yelling at you, or more subtle, like a song on the radio? 3, how do you feel when you're experiencing an anxiety trigger? This is feeling, not thinking. How do you feel? Number 4, what thoughts go through your mind when you're experiencing anxiety? This is your thinking, not your feeling. So what are your thoughts when you're experiencing anxiety? Our minds are powerful tools, but they can also be misleading. Cognitive distortions convince us of something that isn't true, with positive or negative results, depending on what type you have. Some common ones include such things as all or nothing thinking. You see things in black and white without any shades of grey. For instance, you might think that if you make one small mistake, you're a complete failure. Overgeneralization. You take one negative event and assume that it will always happen. For example, you might think that because you get rejected by one person, you will always be alone. Mental filter. You focus on the negative and ignore the positive. For example, you might dwell on a single mistake you made while forgetting all the good things you've done that day. Disqualifying the positive. You dismiss the good things in your life because you think they don't count. For example, you might tell yourself that a compliment you received was just someone being nice and it just doesn't mean anything. Jumping to conclusions. You assume you know what others are thinking without any evidence. An example of that is you might think that someone is laughing at you, even though there's no reason to believe that. Magnification, minimization. You make a big deal out of the things that are small and vice versa. An example is you might think that a tiny mistake is a disaster or that huge success is no big deal. Emotional reasoning. You assume that because you feel something, it must be true. An example is you might think that because you're feeling insecure and worthless, there must be something wrong with you. So these are all examples of the state of your distorted thinking. What we are looking at is a tool that you could use, and the log document for this tool is available on the website in the resources section of www.bostepi.co.uk. Please feel free to access it and use this example to help you complete those logs. Anxiety is always future orientated. It is driven by what if thinking. We don't become anxious over the past, what has happened already. Rather, we become anxious over imagined future adverse events or catastrophes, and a sense of a lack of control, which can stem from the unknown. This is the emotion regulation wheel. Although an academic approach, it is useful to place yourself within this wheel to identify what is beneficial, what to do, what not to use, and what to use with caution. Emotion regulation refers to an individual's attempt to increase, maintain, or decrease positive and negative emotions. The ability to effectively regulate one's emotion can be considered a crucial life skill. Firstly, some strategies focus directly on changing the intensity of the emotion. Common examples of this type of strategy are suppression, distraction, and progressive muscle relaxation. For instance, to reduce the intensity of fear, a person may try to suppress the thought of an upcoming stressful event. Second, emotion regulation strategies can focus on changing the individual's relationship with the emotion at hand. Acceptance-based coping and meditation are two examples of strategies that do not aim to reduce the intensity of the emotion, but rather focus on the person's ability and willingness to allow an emotion to be present. Thirdly, some strategies focus primarily on altering the individual's perspective. Cognitive reappraisal, cognitive restructuring, and cognitive dissonance reductions are all examples of strategies that focus on looking at the emotional state or trigger from a different angle. For example, after making a mistake, the individual may reframe the mistake and associated regret as something to learn from. Likewise, a person may learn to look at emotional thoughts as beliefs rather than facts. The present tool has been designed to help you analyze your emotion regulation strategies and consider some other more effective alternatives. The Poem of Serenity. Some may or may not have heard of this wonderful poem, which is quite settling. The fortification is in the boundaries of what you can affect or cannot affect. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We can use this principle and use the tool circle of concern and influence to help us with our anxiety. There are many toolkits to help with retraining your thinking to challenge your unhelpful thinking. One such tool is Stephen Covey's Circle of Concern. The idea is to be proactive, that is, find what works for you and identify things that are beyond one's control. Here is your tool. Grab an A4 piece of paper and put a heading on it as the circle of concern. Write down all the problems and current challenges you have. Include the ones you think are likely to go wrong. This includes what others will say or think about you and your feelings, all the what-ifs that might come to your mind. Once you have done this, draw a circle around it and review the content. Now, on another piece of paper, put the heading Circle of Influence. Systematically write down what you can and will do against the issues and worries and what-ifs you have identified. Take your time by writing what you think you can do against each of them. Once you've done this, you can then act on them. But please note, you don't have to tackle all of them at once. Possibly look at the ones you can immediately see a way forward with, what would be considered the low-lying fruit. This approach is not only practical, but will cultivate your authority and the control you need to make those changes. I hope this has been useful for you.